Everybody had slept with their doors unlocked and the windows open and so forth. But things were starting to change dramatically.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the silliest slip-ups that led to murderers being apprehended.
I was not really happy, but kind of relieved. Normally, I don't very often agree with the death penalty, but with him, it was necessary.
Neville Heath's hotel stay.
She met Neville Heath, probably impressed by this military bearing, and he put himself over as a lieutenant colonel. He took her out to dinner and persuaded her to come back to the hotel room.
This Brit's killing spree was cut short by one careless check-in. In 1946, Heath, a World War II veteran, developed a strange pattern of checking into hotels and picking up women, two of whom he murdered. And he might have gotten away with it, but for the critical mistake of using his real name when checking in with one of his conquests at a hotel.
She was a pretty thing. Tall, slender. I think London rather dazzled her. You know these small-town girls.
Not quite as you do, I imagine.
Though the other times he was careful enough to use pseudonyms, Heath apparently believed that simply adding the military title Lieutenant Colonel to his name would be enough to avoid suspicion. This misguided decision not only led directly to his arrest, but also secured his place among the most incompetent criminals of all time.
If they could prove insanity in some form, then actually they stood a lot better chance of being reprieved.
Joel Riffkin's missing license plate.
Drug-addicted, disease-carrying vermin is the lie I told myself.
This Long Island native is currently serving a 203-year sentence for the brutal deaths of at least 9 women, though he actually confessed to several more. Riffkin targeted vulnerable females in the New York City area, typically dismembering them and scattering their remains in rivers, woodlands, and golf courses.
There were mini clusters. Little, sets of 3.
In 1993, he was brought to justice during a routine traffic stop because he was driving without a license plate. When he attempted to flee, a high-speed chase ensued, ending with a collision. Upon inspecting his truck, officers discovered the decomposing body of Tiffany Bresciani. The moral of Riffkin's story? Never drive without a license plate, or run from the police, or, murder people.
Would you have killed again if you weren't caught?
As much as I say I wanted to stop, there probably would have been others.
Myy Travis's map.
We had several theories developed as to why they stopped in October. Perhaps the 9/11 crisis that occurred, perhaps this person was in the military.
When you're this vocal about your crimes, should it really come as a shock when you end up in prison? This St. Louis waiter didn't seem to think so. In the early 2000s, Travis left a trail of victims and even created a torture chamber in his basement where he filmed grisly snuff films.
There was a need, I felt, and some of the people at our paper felt also, to put faces and a humanity to these women.
When a story about one of the slayings was published in the newspaper, Travis responded with what he thought was an anonymous letter, attaching a printed map that revealed the location of the body. What Travis failed to realize was that the map contained a URL identifier, which gave investigators the evidence they needed to apprehend Travis.
We could tell it was computer generated, though he had cut off the borders, and we didn't know what website it came from.
Between this and the lovely videos, Travis had a lot of explaining to do. David Berkowitz's parking ticket.
David Berkowitz, 24 years old, a postal worker, walked out of his Yonkers apartment last night, turned the ignition key in his car, and found himself surrounded by police. Well, he said, "You got me."
Better known as the Son of Sam, Berkowitz tormented New York City in the 1970s with a series of random shootings. Claiming to be in cahoots with a demonic dog, he taunted the police and media with handwritten letters that fueled public fear. One night, Berkowitz parked near a fire hydrant in Brooklyn, which any experienced driver knows is a parking no-no.
The detectives of the Brooklyn Omega Squad, part of that 300-cop 44-killer manhunt, captured the man they say is Son of Sam.
A witness later reported a suspicious figure near the scene, and police began combing through traffic tickets issued in the area that night. Upon further investigation, they found a rifle and a bag filled with ammunition in Berkowitz's vehicle, leading to his swift arrest and an alarmingly proud confession.
Son of Sam killed 6 and wounded 7. How many people do you know, your neighbors, people who might fit that description? Nice, quiet, a little moody, kept to himself.
Charles Ng's stolen fish.
They combust the fantasy. because they start saying to each other, what we need is to have lots of children to repopulate the world and make better citizens, a kind of social engineering project.
Imagine nearly getting away with multiple gruesome murders, and then sacrificing it all for a can of salmon. With his accomplice Leonard Lake, Ng subjected people of various ages to horrific abuse before taking their lives. They had even created a horrendous dungeon on a property they used in Calaveras County, California.
Ng was a very shy person who himself could not have done this, but happily joined the venture so that he would have a chance of the kind of sexuality his shyness made impossible.
While on the lam in Canada, Ng, who suffers from kleptomania, shoplifted some canned fish from a department store. His arrest for this offense eventually revealed him to be wanted in the United States. That small theft set off a chain of events that ended his deadly spree and landed Ng on death row.
Evidence was so overwhelming. When you consider the fact that you had him on film with a number of the victims telling them that he was going to kill them, along with all of the other evidence that was found, it was a pretty rock-solid case.
Albert Fish's Watermark. Known as the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Boogeyman, and the Gray Man, Fish was infamous for his carnage. However, his reign of terror over New York City came to an end with a careless mistake involving a single piece of paper. After kidnapping and cannibalizing young Grace Budd in 1928, he sent a gruesome letter to her family, filled with chilling details of the crime and erratic psychological ramblings. Unbeknownst to Fish, the envelope containing the letter bore a distinctive watermark reading New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. This small clue led the police directly to the rooming house where he was staying, resulting in his arrest. The Linz Angels' arrogance. The so-called Linz Angels of Death consisted of 4 Austrian nurses' aides who preyed upon the elderly. The women would forcibly cause patients to overdose on morphine and tranquilizers. Other times, they drowned patients by filling their lungs with water. Although the angels claimed they simply wanted to put people out of their misery, it's largely believed they acted out of sadism rather than mercy. To add another layer of disturbing to the story, the angels would likely have gotten away with countless more murders had they not been overheard arrogantly discussing their secret out loud at a tavern. Charles Schmidt's show and tell.
Everybody had slept with their doors unlocked and the windows open and so forth. But things were starting to change dramatically.
Time for a serial killer pro tip. After you've killed someone, it's generally not a great idea to show off the body. Schmidt, also known as the Pied Piper of Tucson, strangled his girlfriend Gretchen Fritz, as well as her younger sister Wendy, in 1965. This was more than a year after he had bludgeoned another young woman named Aline Rowe to death with a rock.
Had a fake bridge on his nose where he said it was broken. It wasn't. But it looked good.
Apparently unable to resist bragging about his exploits, Schmidt showed his best friend Richard Bruns where he had buried the sisters' bodies. Bruns became frightened and alerted the authorities, bringing Schmidt's spree to a close.
Reportedly, his mother chose to bury him here in the prison cemetery, thinking that if she buried him on a public site, his tombstone would be vandalized.
Ted Bundy's stolen car.
One of his interviews, the interviewer asked him point blank, he said, "Ted, why did you kill?" And Ted kind of raised one eyebrow and kind of smiled and says, "Because I liked it."
Bundy is often considered one of the slickest and most cunning serial killers in history, but this story doesn't exactly support that idea. You're likely familiar with Bundy's dark deeds. He used his good looks and charisma to gain the trust of dozens of women, whom he then proceeded to murder in cold blood.
Just barely 20 years of age, I had a 1-month-old little girl at home.
This proud, pompous psychopath managed to escape police custody several times before finally being caught in Florida, where he was driving a stolen vehicle, which eventually turned out to have evidence of his misdeeds. Though he attempted to flee once more, this encounter resulted in his capture and ultimately execution.
I was not really happy, but kind of relieved. Normally, I don't very often agree with the death penalty, but with him, it was necessary.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Dennis Rader's floppy disk.
They said that there's a real possibility that the Shirley Vian case is connected to the Otero case.
The infamous BTK killer eluded capture for 3 decades until a foolish lapse of judgment cost him his freedom. Beginning in the 1970s, Rader terrorized the Midwest with the vicious and mysterious slaying of numerous citizens. Like many of his kind, he enjoyed taunting detectives with letters and clues.
This letter is very clear to tell us, you have the wrong people. You need to stop looking at them. You need to come back and focus your attention on me. I am the important one.
In 2004, after years of silence, Rader asked in one of his notes whether he could safely send a floppy disk without being traced. The police, playing along, assured him it was fine, and he naively believed them. This, of course, proved to be the rookie mistake that finally did Rader in. Police used information on the disk to gain his identity.
Sure, you like. Because I was trying to catch you.
I lied to you because I was trying to catch you. And he was incredulous to the fact that I wanted this to end.
Which of these incriminating blunders do you find the most ridiculous? Let's talk about it in the comments.
Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the guy next door.